The morning light brushed the edges of my little street, casting long shadows that stretched across driveways and nestled around each home with a gentle embrace. Our neighborhood was a quiet one, the kind of place where time moved slowly, and the air carried whispers of stories long told and soon forgotten. It was the perfect setting, or so I thought, until Karen moved in next door. She arrived like a gust of wind, unsettling and determined. Her presence was immediately notable, not for her interest in the community, but for her obsession with her rules, the kind of rules that snaked through the neighborhood like creeping ivy, slowly suffocating whatever they touched. I first noticed her disdain for my porch on a crisp autumn morning. The leaves were busy painting the ground in hues of amber and gold. But Karen's eyes were fixed on the white columns of my front porch. It stood proudly, a relic of history and craftsmanship, whispering tales of the past to anyone who cared to listen. Most people didn't, but Karen wasn't most people. On that day, she lingered at the edge of my property, her gaze a noiseless accusation. I could feel her thoughts, sharp and piercing, darting through the air. Her first letter arrived shortly after, a polite veneer barely concealing her intent. It was filled with codes and regulations. Each line a pointed finger directed at my home. She suggested improvements. I saw them as amputations. The porch was more than just wood and nails to me. It was an echo of a bygone era, a testament to resilience and beauty that had stood its ground through decades of change. Perhaps Karen sensed its power, its quiet defiance against uniformity, or perhaps she merely saw it as an affront to her carefully manicured vision of order. I responded with silence, an ocean of calm against her storm of paperwork, a counterbalance, deliberate and measured. Ignoring her sharpened words felt right, like choosing not to pluck an irritating weed, knowing it would eventually wither from neglect. Time stretched out, each day a repetition of the ones before. The leaves fell, the winds grew colder, and Karen's persistence never wavered. Her letters arrived with the regularity of tides, each one a new assault, yet my resolve remained steadfast. I often stood on my porch, letting the breeze carry away my thoughts. As I traced the intricate carvings along the railing with my fingers, I felt connected to something larger, something untouchable. It was a feeling that Karen, with her tidy rows of rules, could never understand. Then came the day the construction crew arrived, their machines rumbling like distant thunder. I watched from the window, my breath caught between disbelief and indignation. Karen stood nearby, overseeing the operation with a satisfaction that bordered on triumph. When they tore down the first column, it felt as though a vital thread had been pulled from the fabric of my world, yet beneath the surface, a quiet victory simmered, just waiting to rise. Unbeknownst to Karen, my porch was no ordinary structure. It was a protected landmark, its significance woven into the very laws she so diligently quoted, a secret, hidden in plain sight, biding its time amidst the noise of destruction and change. As the dust settled and the echo of machinery faded, I prepared for what came next, a gentle reminder that beneath the surface of every story lies an unexpected twist, and sometimes, the simplest of things, a porch, a history, an overlooked detail hold the greatest power of all. The wind picked up, carrying with it the promise of an inevitable reckoning. I breathed it in, ready. The sun was a spectral presence, casting long shadows over the neighborhood as Karen's reign of terror expanded like ink in water. It seemed everything I did was a violation, an infraction, a disturbance in her precious suburban harmony. The absurdity of her citations would have been laughable if it hadn't required constant attention. My mailbox was perpetually stuffed with her sanctimonious notices, each one a misguided attempt to mold reality to her liking. A lawn ornament, a gift from a distant cousin, became an unsanctioned display. My choice of garden flowers, a defiant blaze of wild daisies, was labeled a nuisance to community aesthetics. Even the gentle chime of my wind bells, A melody that had danced through the air for years without complaint was now noise pollution. In Karen's world, silence was golden only when it wasn't the silence of others. The whispers started next, a soft rustling that followed me like a stray breeze. Neighbors eyed me with curiosity and pity, as if I was a character in a play they didn't quite understand. Some nodded sympathetically, but their smiles were thin and brittle. Others avoided eye contact altogether, as though my porchless plight was contagious. Karen was an artist of gossip, weaving it with the deftness of a spider spinning its web. Her stories, half-truths painted with the brush of imagination, spread unchallenged. I became the villain in her suburban saga, the rebel who couldn't conform. Her latest masterpiece of pettiness arrived on a day thick with rain. A notice slipped under my door, detailed an emergency meeting she had orchestrated, the agenda my continued non-compliance. The list of grievances was as long as it was ridiculous. Each entry felt like a drum beat, steady and relentless, echoing her obsession with control. I could picture the meeting already. The gathered faces eager for spectacle. Karen presiding with the air of a monarch surveying her subjects. Her voice would carry like a clarion call, each word meticulously chosen to inflame and incite. But beneath it all, there was an undercurrent of desperation, a frantic need to maintain her grip on the narrative. As I prepared for the gathering storm, I mulled over my options. There was power in silence, in letting her tirade wash over me like a wave against stone. Yet, there was also power in truth, in revealing the depths of her folly. The history of my porch was an ace up the sleeve, a fact she had overlooked in her zeal, a protected landmark, its significance rooted in the town's past, a beacon of resilience and history she had tried to erase like a misplaced ink blot, standing in the rain. I felt the weight of the moment press against me. Her campaign of absurdity was nearing its crescendo, and I, the calm eye in the storm, was ready to let her arrogance collide with the immovable truth. The world seemed to tilt at an odd angle as I stood before the rubble of what had once been my cherished porch. The air around me simmered with the low thrum of the cicadas, an unsettling chorus that underscored my disbelief. It was a jigsaw of splintered wood and scattered memories. Karen, in her self-righteous vendetta, had achieved the destruction she so zealously coveted. Her belief in the supremacy of the HOA rules had blinded her to the tangible and intangible history she had so carelessly erased. I was left with the aftermath, a battlefield of bureaucracy and broken history. There was no need to rush through the heartache. The loss was palpable, like a phantom limb that ached in its absence. But beneath the sadness, an ember of resolve began to glow, slowly igniting into a controlled burn of determination. I knew what I had to do. The records were my allies, silent and unyielding. Every document I unearthed from the archives was a piece of a mosaic that Karen had never bothered to see. The aged photos, yellowing with time, depicted generations who had once leaned against the porch rails, their laughter preserved in static poses. And there it was, the pièce de résistance, the official designation that marked the porch as a protected landmark. It was a discovery that was both vindicating and tragic. Vindicating because it meant that Karen's reckless actions had violated more than just my peace of mind. Tragic because it took destruction for the truth to come to light. Still, this was my moment to set the scales right. With each piece of evidence meticulously prepared and cataloged, I crafted my response, a subtle and formal communication that bore none of the ferocity of Karen's demands but all the weight of undeniable truth. There was no need for confrontation. The power of the facts was my quiet retort. The day I submitted my documentation, the sky was an unblemished blue, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded below it. I handed over the papers with a calm assurance, a quiet confidence that was as unyielding as the bricks that had once supported my porch. It was more than a submission. It was a statement, a reclamation of dignity layered with irony that only I seemed to perceive. In the days that followed, a silence enveloped the neighborhood. Karen's voice, once a constant, shrill hum in the ether, seemed to retreat into the background. The HOA's board, faced with an undeniable breach, could not ignore the gravity of what had transpired. They handled the situation with the kind of careful consideration that had been absent when Karen had first launched her crusade. Eventually, a letter arrived for me, its envelope crisp and official. Inside, it spoke of reparations, of restitution, and, most importantly, of restoration. My porch would rise again, sanctified by its history, protected by its legacy. And so, as the workers set about rebuilding, I watched with a quiet satisfaction. Karen, a shadow now, slipped past on occasion, her eyes avoiding mine. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. The very rules she had so zealously enforced had become her undoing. The new porch, a replica of its esteemed predecessor, stood not just as a piece of architecture but as a testament to resilience, to history, and to the quiet strength found in truth. It was a small victory, yet monumental in its significance. As I leaned against the newly sanded balustrade, I felt the weight of all those who had leaned there before me. The porch, like me, was a survivor. The morning light lay over the neighborhood like a gauzy veil, softening edges and brimming with false promise. I stood at the window, my gaze caught on the vacant space where my porch once stood, a skeletal remnant of its former self. Its absence was a wound, raw and gaping, unseen by all, yet profoundly felt by me. This wasn't just about planks and nails. It was history, my history, uprooted by the relentless will of an overzealous Karen. Karen, her name was a whisper on the lips of those who passed by, eyes averted, conversations clipped, the woman who wielded the HOA guidelines like a sledgehammer, her zealotry unmatched, her dedication to the rulebook nearly religious. She had torn down my porch, thinking it a victory, but the law she revered was about to turn against her. My porch, you see, wasn't just a structure, it was a protected landmark, a testament to an era long past, a silent witness to stories untold. But Karen, blinded by her self-righteous mission, had ignored the whispers, the plaques, the history embedded in every grain of wood. Neighbors began to notice. First it was subtle, heads turning as they walked by, curiosity piqued by the sudden emptiness. Then came the questions, quiet and probing. Beneath the surface of polite conversation, tension simmered, a pot about to boil over, and I could feel it in the air, thick and charged. The irony was almost poetic. The very rules Karen lived by were the ones that had protected what she destroyed. The realization crept slowly through the neighborhood, like ink spreading in water, until it reached her. I imagined her expression, the dawning horror, the white-hot anger at her own oversight. Day by day, the collective unease grew. Karen's house, once the bastion of order, became a fortress under siege. It was there in the way people crossed the street when passing her yard, in the clipped nods and curt smiles. The silence spoke louder than words ever could. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows like fingers reaching across the earth, I caught a glimpse of her standing at her window. Her silhouette was rigid, framed against the warm glow inside. I wondered if she felt it too. The shift in the air, the isolation closing in like a vice. The townsfolk were gathering, voices hushed but determined, their intentions clear. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. But more than that, they wanted restoration, a return to the harmony that had been disrupted by one woman's folly. The porch had been more than just mine. It was a piece of their collective heritage, and its loss was a scar none could ignore. I watched as neighbors gathered in small groups, their faces set with purpose, Their whispers carried on the breeze. A meeting was being planned, not an official HOA one, but something more organic, more powerful, the weight of community rising up to challenge the decree of an overreaching authority. Karen's downfall was not the goal, though it was inevitable. The real victory lay in the restoration of balance, of respect for the past. As dusk settled into night, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. The porch would be rebuilt. I knew, and with it, perhaps, a sense of unity that transcended the petty dictates of any association. In the end, the community would decide what kind of neighborhood it wanted to be, not one ruled by an iron fist, but one where stories were preserved and memories safeguarded. The tides were turning, and amidst the chaos of change, I found a steady current, guiding us back to what mattered most. In the aftermath of the demolition, the morning light filtered through the scattered debris of what was once my beloved porch. The air felt thick with the scent of fresh wood chips and justice not yet served. The neighborhood was a quiet tableau, each house standing like silent witnesses to Karen's audacious act. I walked through the remains, my every step a soft crunch over the splinters and memories. My footsteps traced a path to the small, iron plaque that had clung stubbornly to the last standing post. It was weathered, but its message was clear, a testament to history, a declaration of preservation. This porch wasn't just an appendage to my home. It was a protected landmark, a beacon of historical significance that Karen, in her fervor for conformity, had failed to see. Karen's overzealous need for control had blinded her, leading her to bulldoze not just a structure, but a piece of the past. But I had known. I had always known. In the quiet moments when the house was just mine, when the world dimmed and left only the hushed echoes of those who'd come before, I felt the weight of its history. I had kept the documentation safe, woven into a tapestry of family records and municipal decrees. I had anticipated this day, not because I doubted her audacity, but because I had learned that battles with people like Karen are never truly about aesthetics or rules. They're about power, and in this silent war, I had chosen my weapon. The law was a silent ally, patient and precise, waiting for the moment to strike. The legal paperwork, meticulously gathered and quietly updated over the years, now lay ready on my kitchen table. Each document was a testament to foresight, a safeguard against rash actions. I took a breath, feeling the weight of what was to come. There was a certain power in patience, in allowing events to unfold with the inevitability of a tide. The phone call to the Historical Commission was brief, a mere formality. Their response was swift and decisive, a stark contrast to my deliberate pace. They shared my quiet outrage, their voices carrying the promise of restitution and repercussions. For Karen, the consequences would be unexpected and severe. The irony was rich, like a well-brewed cup of coffee, bitter, yet satisfying. In the days that followed, the neighborhood buzzed with whispered speculations. Karen's name was a murmur on the wind, her actions dissected in living rooms and over garden fences. She had stirred a hornet's nest, but the sting would be hers to bear. On the day the inspectors arrived, I watched from my window as they moved with the authoritative grace of those who understand the weight of their duty. Their presence was a reminder that history may slumber, but it never forgets. Karen stood on her porch across the street, her face a mask of defiance that couldn't quite hide the uncertainty in her eyes. In the end, there were no grand confrontations, no heated exchanges, just the slow, inevitable turning of the legal wheels. A notice would arrive soon enough, spelling out the fines and the mandate to restore what had been lost. Her power, once so formidable, would shrink beneath the crushing weight of regulations she had chosen to ignore. Mutin, in the quiet of my home, amidst the scattered remnants of my porch, I found a strange comfort. Karen had underestimated the quiet strength of those she sought to dominate, and in her oversight, she had set the stage for her own undoing. I sipped my coffee, watching the world outside move on, knowing that justice, like history, had a way of setting things right. The morning light spilled over the neighborhood like a soft blanket, casting long shadows that danced across manicured lawns and pastel-painted facades. The air felt different now, charged with a quiet anticipation. I stood in the center of my yard, where my porch once stood proudly, and took in the scene around me. The remnants of Karen's folly lay scattered splintered wood and crushed dreams, silent witnesses to a battle I never asked for, but had fought with unyielding resolve. Karen's reign had crumbled, much like the porch that had stood for decades before her intrusion. Her carefully curated world, built on rules and restrictions, was unraveling thread by thread. The neighborhood had begun to see her for what she truly was, a tyrant cloaked in the guise of propriety. The whispers had started subtly, mere ripples of discontent among the residents, but like any well-tended garden, once the weeds of discord took root, they spread rapidly, and now the evidence lay scattered before them. My porch, a protected landmark, its legacy entwined with the very history Karen had failed to respect. Her decision to tear it down, a calculated move intended to bend me to her will, had backfired spectacularly. The irony was almost poetic. I could feel the quiet hum of vindication rising from my chest, curling my lips into a semblance of a smile. She had cut deep, but in her recklessness, she had only wounded herself. I walked among the wreckage, touching the sun-bleached wood and feeling the worn grains beneath my fingers. Each piece told a story, not just of my family, but of the community's past. The porch had been a witness to countless summers, neighborhood gatherings, whispered secrets, and quiet reflections. It was more than wood and nails. It was a symbol of resilience and belonging. The backlash against Karen had been swift. The HOA, once her stronghold, had turned against her. What once was a fortress of control had become a house of cards collapsing under the weight of her misdeeds. Her influence waned, her voice drowned out by calls for change. Her reign was over. But I felt no triumph in her downfall, no thrill of conquest, only a bittersweet sense of justice served, as much as her actions had hurt me. They had also brought the community together in a way I hadn't anticipated. There was a strength in unity, a power in shared purpose that transcended the petty confines of one woman's vendetta. The community rallied around me, a show of solidarity that warmed the spaces Karen's coldness had left empty. Neighbors I barely knew offered help to rebuild, to restore what Karen had tried to erase. Their kindness and support were the true treasures unearthed from this conflict. Standing there, with the remnants of my porch at my feet, I felt the subtle shift in the winds of our neighborhood. Karen was no longer the storm, she was merely a breeze passing through, and like all breezes, she would eventually dissipate, leaving behind only the clear skies of a community ready to heal and grow anew. The porch would rise again, stronger and more resilient, a testament to endurance. It would stand as a beacon of the past and a promise for the future, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, some things remain unbreakable.